The NFL draft is here, and the Denver Broncos be on the clock at 20th overall. They'll take a wide receiver or they'll take a tight end. We share our final predictions on today's episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is finally here, Broncos Country. The NFL draft commences tonight, and all the mock drafts that we've been doing are going to come to an end. The NFL draft is here. Where will the Denver Broncos go? Welcome into another episode, Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, where, it is your team every day. Thank you to all the everydayers out there in Broncos Country. Thanks for tuning in, making us your first listen, however you choose to do so. And if you're not yet an everydayer, become one by hitting that subscribe or that follow button so you never miss out on all the Broncos news, content, coverage, analysis, and more. As always, I'm Cody Roark, Broncos credentialed beat reporter for Mile High Sports.
And I'm Sayre Bedinger, site expert at predominantlyorange.com.
And together you get Locked on Broncos every single day, all year long. In Broncos Country, it is finally here. The NFL draft, the moment a lot of us have been waiting for since free agency has concluded, and now the Broncos will kind of put the final touches on assembling the 2025 roster, at least for training camp, and it all goes down tonight. Here's what you're going to get on today's episode of the show. Sayre and I, we're going to share our final predictions on the NFL draft, where we think the Broncos are going to go. I differ from Sayre. I think they're going to go with a wide receiver. Sayre doesn't think that they're going to go with that position. We'll debate and discuss our picks here. Plus, what other teams on the NFL draft board should the Broncos follow ahead of them and also behind them who could look to maybe jump them? We'll look at how the board falls here today, and then we'll react to Peter Schrager's final mock draft that he puts out the day before the draft happens there. He's very accurate, and he's got the Broncos taking Emeka Egbuka to the Denver Broncos. React to that and see if there's smoke to that possibility. So with that said, Sayre, let's open it up on today's episode of the show. Our final draft predictions. Obviously, Broncos Country, as you're watching or listening, you can share your final draft predictions with us here on Locked on Broncos. I'm going to start with you. When it comes to the 20th overall pick tonight, how do you see the board falling, and who do you have the Broncos taking tonight?
Well, I think there's going to be a wide variety of big men taken before the Denver Broncos are on the board at 20 overall. Cody, there's been a ton of rumors about offensive linemen loading up the top 10 picks. There's been a lot of talk about certain defensive linemen that could go within the top 20 picks. I think edge rushers are going to be very popular in the teens, and because of that, I could really see the best player on the board for the Broncos being Colston Loveland, the Michigan tight end. Now, that's a name that we had some serious mock draft fatigue earlier in the offseason, right? Every mock draft had Colston Loveland to Denver. It's kind of funny how things come full circle. After the Broncos signed Evan Ingram in NFL free agency, our good friend Mike Kliss over there at 9 News basically said, you can take tight end off the table in round one. It's not happening. Now he's come back and kind of feels like Colston Loveland might be one of the Broncos' top 2 potential targets from what he's hearing. And of course, we know that the Broncos, they're tight-lipped. They don't let things out. But I do think there's some merit to this. I think that Colston is one of the true blue chip players in this class. I think he's a guy that can play inline, can split out, true joker qualities at tight end. And the Broncos, we know they love to use 12 personnel. Imagine Evan Ingram and Colston Loveland on the field at the same time. That would open up the middle of the field tremendously. A big issue for the Denver Broncos last year. So I think Colston Loveland makes a lot of sense if he falls down the board.
Oh, you know what? I wouldn't be opposed to it. I could see that happening, and I think it adds value to the Broncos. I mean, what is the idea here, right? We want to give Bo Nix as many weapons as possible. And look, they went out and they spent money in free agency on the defensive side of the ball. Yes, Evan Ingram counts as the money spent in free agency, but primarily they went to go strengthen, a strength of theirs while they try to bolster and strengthen, an area that is still growing, that is young. And you look at all the young receivers that the Broncos have. You look at, obviously, the addition of Evan Ingram now, the questions at running back. The Broncos are in a position right now to add to the offense, which you and I have kind of been banging that drum all summer. I mean, not all summer, but pretty much all offseason long, that, hey, you have to just go all offense in this draft. I wouldn't be opposed if Sean Payton did that for sure. I like that pick. I am going to go in a different direction as you. What was it? About a month ago, I posted a tweet, and I said I am all on the Emeka Egbuka train to Denver, Emeka or bust. I'd be happy if it's Colston Loveland, Travion Henderson, but I'm planting my flag here and going with Emeka Egbuka here, a wide receiver. I know I asked Sean Payton the question at his pre-draft press conference about wide receiver, and certainly he said, we love the room that we have. We just did an episode reacting to that here. We love the room that we have here. We can't pass on, we don't need to, if we need a blender, we need to get the blender, over a shiny crystal. And I think when you look at Emeka Egbuka, he's not like the shiny crystal. He's not the shiny crystal, Sayre, that, it's glistening and you're like, I got to have it. But you look at like, hey, what do we need? We need a blender. We need something that, makes everything blend together, like mix in. To me, I look at Emeka Egbuka and I think about where the Broncos are at here, and knowing that they like their wide receiver room, you still add to that, right? You want to add the extra ingredient in there that's going to make everything kind of come together or hold it together there. I think Emeka Egbuka is ready to be able to do that here for the Broncos. And that's why I'm planting my flag firmly on him right now. And it could go either way, at this point. But I'm curious your thoughts on my selection.
I love it. I think that genuinely, when it comes to this draft, I'm as open-minded as I've ever been. And I don't say that to sort of hedge my bets with every prospect. Like, I know there's been some disagreements amongst Broncos country about guys this offseason, but that's to be expected. I mean, we're no longer talking about drafting a quarterback, which is really nice. We're talking about supporting that quarterback. I think you could make so many different picks make sense, whether it's at 20, whether it's moving up, whether it's moving back. There's not many scenarios that I dislike in this draft, Cody. I mean, you and I have talked about some of them, like taking a safety in round 1 wouldn't be the most exciting given where this team is at right now. I mean, there'd be an underwhelming aspect of taking an interior offensive lineman, knowing that the only starting job available is center, but even that could make some sense. Even off-ball linebacker could make some sense. I think maybe an edge guy would be a little head-scratching, would kind of cause some confusion. But other than that, aren't we kind of just wide open? Let's take a running back. Let's take a receiver. Let's get a tight end. Go ahead and get a D lineman. Go ahead and, hey, if Jahdae Barron is still there, go ahead. Might as well. Just throw him into the mix. I'm so ready for the Broncos, whatever they want to do in this draft. But I love you and I have our preferences, don't we? The Ohio State guys. We love those guys. Colston Loveland, Tyler Warren, love those guys. If they can trade up and get Genty or Travis Hunter, the pipe dreams type stuff, sure, go for it. That would be so much fun. But you know what? I think the thing is like, whether it's Omarion Hampton or Travion Henderson or whoever it may be, Caleb Johnson, even if you trade down, I just feel like this year's first round, do whatever you want. Go with your gut, because George Payton said he's so prepared. I'm ready for whatever.
Yeah, and look, I think Broncos country should be ready for whatever as well. I think whatever Denver decides to do, I think it's going to be calculated. They're not going to – I don't think they're going to reach necessarily. I think that would be a shock when we look at the trend of these these two guys together in these last 3 years. The idea of them just suddenly changing – how they've done operations, how they've done business. I mean, it's different now. Granted, they haven't been in a position to pick, where they're at now in with the 20th overall pick. Last year they had 12. The year prior they didn't have first round pick. The year prior to that they didn't have, they have first round pick as well. You had to trade up into round 2 in Sean Payton's first year with the team to be able to get Marvin Mims. So I think right now we're going to see this calculated effort. And if there is a player who they feel like, hey, this guy's not going to be here at 20 when we really want him, he's within striking range, I could see them moving up. But one of my final predictions as well, I think they stay put at number 20. I don't think they move up or move back. Where are you at in terms of that line of thinking?
Yeah, I think that's kind of my gut feeling as well, Cody, because right now it sounds like there's way more teams that want to trade down than want to trade up. My personal favorite scenario is obviously always to have your cake and eat it too. I would love for the Broncos to add more darts into their, or more arrows into the quiver, so to speak, and give George Payton chances. If he feels so prepared for this draft, if he feels super confident that on day 2, day 3, there's a D lineman who could play right away, a running backs rounds 2 through 6 who could potentially start for you. If he feels that confident, I think trading down with a desperate team for a quarterback, whoever that may be, that would excite me greatly. Now, I don't think you have to move off of 20. But the Broncos believe that there's going to be similar players going at 10th overall as could go at 20. So either scenario works to me, but I love the idea of have your cake and eat it too. Get an additional top 100 pick, 2 if you can. And if that works out, great. If not, it's no big deal.
I know we're talking about day one draft predictions and round one, but I'm going to give a little bold take here because obviously I got to travel to New York after the NFL draft for the bridal shower for my fiance. But my prediction is that the Broncos, they stay at 20, right? But they trade up closer in round number 2 to take Travion Henderson. That's going to be my second bold prediction here. And then that means they're going to give up their 3rd round pick, which is not ideal, but they come away with 2 picks overall in the top 100 just to be able to do that. Maybe they acquire an additional 4th to be able to swap, and then bang, you have your other picture there. But I think they're going to go, their first 2 picks are going to be instant impact contributors, Emeka Egbuka and Travion Henderson. If that was the case, I'd be a happy man. Like I said, I'm stoked about that. But Broncos Country, make sure you let us know your predictions here on today's episode. Lockdown Broncos. We're not done just yet. As the Broncos look at the NFL draft, at how it unfolds tonight, what other teams on the board should the Broncos pay attention to ahead of them and behind them? We'll break that down much more in today's episode. Locked On Broncos.
Today's episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go, right? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's easy to lose track. And that is where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances.
And look, Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial overview, command center, whatever you want to call it, where you can track all of your accounts, all of your investments, and all of your spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building wealth.
Well, that all-in-one convenience is truly the hack with Monarch Money, because instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch alone to check your finances, track spending, and even plan those long-term goals that you may have.
So take control of your finances with Monarch Money today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
Today's episode, Locked On Broncos, is also brought to you by Game Time. And there is nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment just feels huge. It's electric in the arena, especially there in Denver. And with Game Time, you can be part of the action without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting.
And Game Time, they make it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app, they actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60% before tip-off.
And that all-in pricing means that there's no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you pay.
Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
When the Denver Broncos were trying to get Bo Nix last year, Sean Payton was so worried about the teams behind him. He was calling up guys like Jay Glazer to make sure the Rams aren't trying to steal his guy. Who do the Broncos need to be watching for, looking over their shoulder in this year's draft at other teams? Well, we're going to tell you exactly that on today's episode, Locked On Broncos and Broncos Country. If you haven't already done so, go ahead, celebrate draft day today by hitting subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as on YouTube. Your boys, Cody and Sayre, will have you covered all weekend long. Bonus episodes of the show. We're going to be covering everything from the first round to the undrafted free agents, and you don't want to miss a single episode. So do that right now. Cody, let's talk about this, because last year, I think there was some legitimate concern, probably a more heightened concern when you're talking about the quarterback position. Sean Payton was kind of bragging after the first round about how he basically baited the Minnesota Vikings into trading up for JJ McCarthy, but simultaneously he was quite worried that a team like the LA Rams was going to come up and get Bo Nix. So there's an element of the chess match that gets played all over the league. In your eyes, who do you see as the teams that the Broncos really need to be looking over their shoulder at in this year's first round?
Yeah, part of me is wondering, I mean, I'm looking at the teams that are ahead of Denver right now, and that doesn't necessarily worry me too much, right? If let's maybe look at it from the hypothetical. If the Broncos want to get a wide receiver. Okay. I imagine some other guys like Ted McMillan, Matthew Golden, those guys will go a little bit earlier. So for me, I'm looking at other teams. I mean, could the Cowboys take a receiver at 12th overall? It's possible. I don't think the Colts are in a position to do that. I don't think the Dolphins are going to do that. Could the Bengals maybe add another weapon? Maybe. What about the Seattle Seahawks? You need some weapons to throw to for Sam Darnold. Maybe the Seahawks take a wide receiver. I think Denver's in a really good position right now, Sarah, in terms of the teams that are ahead of them. But if Denver, let's say, wants to take a wide receiver like Emeka Egbuka, here are a couple of teams that I'm worried about. I'm worried about the Chargers. I'm worried about the Packers. And I'm worried about the Texans, right? The Chargers picked 22nd overall, Packers 23rd overall, and the Texans at 25th overall. If those teams, let's say it is Emeka Egbuka, who the Broncos really want, if those guys really want him, they may try to trade up. They may try to get ahead of the pack here to see what they can do. And maybe a team like Tampa, who's obviously sitting there at 19th overall, maybe they're willing to trade back at this point, and also how do some of the trade backs that we anticipate that could happen in round one, how does that influence maybe your strategy? Like, could one of these teams try to jump? To me, I think the Broncos got to be worried about some of the teams behind them more specifically. Now, if we were going with your pick, like tight end Colston Loveland, I think the team, you got to be worried about is probably in the AFC West here.
Yeah, it's got to be the Chargers, right? I mean, Jim Harbaugh knows Colston Loveland extremely well. And because of that, you know that he's going to fit your offense. You know that he's going to fit exactly what you want to do. You recruited the guy, right? You know him personally. That's a huge advantage to have. I would set the over-under for Chargers drafting Michigan players, Cody, at least, I'm going to say 3.5. I'm going to set the over-under there, and I'm going to smash the over. I think they're going to be taking plenty of Michigan guys this year, but hopefully they don't get Colston Loveland, because that would be kind of like the final stone in their Thanos Infinity Gauntlet. If you want to talk about that with their offense, you get Ladd McConkey last year. You brought Mike Williams back. You've got Quentin Johnston still in that offense. They got Najee Harris. You add Colston Loveland to the mix. That would really suck for the Denver Broncos, to be honest with you. And I think you have to worry about the Chiefs as well. The Chiefs, they're always going to be aggressive, right? And they've had kind of a tough offseason. And this is a draft where, look, they could go any number of directions. I think everybody's kind of just like, oh yeah, the Chiefs at 31, they'll take an offensive tackle, whoever falls to them. I don't know. I think the Rashee Rice situation, Xavier Worthy situation, I don't know how confident the Chiefs are in those guys. Are they a threat to move up and take a guy like Colston Loveland as the heir apparent to Travis Kelce? How badly would we hate that? All the guys that we've talked about at running back, I think are also options for the Kansas City Chiefs as well, because they've got a bunch of old guys and Isaiah Pacheco at that position right now. And I just don't think they're going to love that situation with the top end talent that they have. Could see them moving up for another playmaker. So yeah, you're always worried about the division rivals and those teams that are consistently aggressive.
If the Chiefs somehow came away with Travion Henderson at the end of round number one, I'd be pissed. That would be, I don't know if it would like floor me, but I'd be like, wow, this sucks. Like I'm very disappointed. Now, I'm bummed out. It may ruin my whole perspective on the rest of the draft. I'm just kidding, though. I think you have to look at, obviously, your division rivals there. And look, there's a chance, I think, that the Keenan Allen re-signs with the Chargers after the draft as well. I mean, they could bring back Keenan Allen, Mike Williams. They got a good lad over there in McConkey, and they got, as you mentioned, Najee. Right now, I think Tyler Conklin is their tight end, which – is that really a needle mover for that offense? I don't necessarily think it's going to be something you're like, oh, yeah, we got to watch out for him. But he is a guy I think can make plays, be a third down option for him. Colston Loveland will make things a little scary, obviously, for an offense. The Broncos really last year, they struggled to stop the Chargers. So maybe also here's an interesting theory. Maybe the Broncos anticipated in the whole process that, hey, we know and we think that the Chargers are going to load up. They may go out and get a tight end here. They signed Najee Harris. Maybe that's why they went out and they got Dre Greenlaw, Talanoa Hufanga. Maybe kind of we anticipate that move, so we're going to counter that ahead of time versus we make a move in the draft, they pick after us, and now it's like, oh no, how do we counter this? Maybe there is some sort of strategy to it. I mean, that's deep level thinking here on it, but overall, the teams I would be more worried about in terms of maybe trying to get ahead of Denver could be the Chargers, Packers, Texans at this point. Is there anyone ahead of Denver that you're necessarily worried about in terms of how the board currently is before any of the trades that we think could happen, do?
I think to stick it with the theme, right, of the AFC West, I think the Las Vegas Raiders, right? You just don't want them to end up with Ashton Genty in round one. You want the Raiders to get like a Mason Graham or something, that's just slightly underwhelming. I mean, Mason's a good player, but I think that when you're talking about having a top 6 overall pick in the draft, that's about as best case scenario as you could ask for a division rival, to get a guy who's, a high motor guy, shorter arms, not a super ultra elite athlete. And it doesn't really move the needle too much because he's probably only going to play up to like 60% of the snaps at the most. So to me, that's a team that you look at and you're like, there's picks that they could make that would really upset me. Tetroya McMillan for the Raiders with Brock Bowers. I mean, can you imagine those guys together in the same offense, having to guard them? That would be tough. I also think that I would not like the Raiders to get Jalen Milroe, Cody. I don't necessarily share this opinion with everybody else in the NFL draft community, but I feel like Jalen Milroe is going to be a really good pro. I want him to go anywhere but the Raiders, because we know the Chargers and Chiefs ain't drafting him.
No, I think those are good points. Another name to consider, because obviously the buzz here leading up to the draft today is that the Jaguars could be looking at getting Ashton Genty. Now, could this be smokescreen to try to get the Raiders? What was it? I think it was John Lynch's first draft as GM. Remember, there were a bunch of rumors, and they fleeced, I think, was it the Chicago Bears into just making a really bad deal? And then they're like, 49ers got their guy they wanted all along. And they're like, actually, the guy we were trying to put the rumors out there, we were going to trade. We're never going to go and get that guy. Could that possibly happen? Maybe. But, if Jacksonville takes Genty, obviously with their selection, part of me is wondering too, like it's also been discussed that they could go out there and add an offensive tackle, the guy out of Mizzou, Armand Membao, potentially. I mean, if the Raiders did that, that would certainly be interesting. I don't know if that would necessarily, I'd be like, all right, good job, Raiders. Look now, because they got Geno. Who do they got? Sincere McCormick. That's their running back, so it's like there's nothing of solidarity there just yet. But I think they're going to try to build this team into a smash mouth, run the football team. We'll see how things pan out here. But Broncos Country, let us know which teams you're worried about ahead of the Broncos, which teams you're worried about behind Denver in terms of how the draft board may fall here tonight. But Broncos Country, we're not done yet. We're going to wrap up today's episode of the show by diving into Peter Schrager's final mock draft, where he sends Ohio State wide receiver Emeka Egbuka to the Denver Broncos. There's been a lot of buzz from Schrager as of the last couple of days on Egbuka, and now he ties them to Denver. Is this smokescreen or is this real? We'll break it down on today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
Today's episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by LinkedIn. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. And that's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in, because when you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in.
And look, LinkedIn, they make it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place.
And here's how it works. Post your job. LinkedIn's new feature, Post Your Job, helps you write job descriptions, and then you quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. Add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. It's no wonder that 72% of small businesses say that LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires.
Post your job for free at LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL. That's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. The fourth quarter action of today's episode of Locked On Broncos is here, and Peter Schrager of ESPN has released his final mock draft. And if you've been following Pete Schrags on social media, you know he's very well connected in this industry with a lot of coaches and a lot of executives around the league. And he's also connected very well here with Sean Payton. The two used to be colleagues together at Fox. And he's got Emeka Egbuka, wide receiver out of Ohio State, landing with the Denver Broncos. We've seen a lot of mocks in the last week or so, Sayre, and I would say a large portion of mock drafters have had Omari and Hampton going to the Broncos at 20th overall. That suddenly has subsided, and now Peter Schrager, who I trust, has Emeka Egbuka heading to the Broncos here, which is also interesting. We got to make note. Last year, Schrager released his mock draft at 12th overall. Who did he have? Bo Nix going to Denver. So, Sayre, I mean, people look at this and they're like, this could just be smokescreen. Certainly it could be. But knowing what I know about Schrags, one of the most honest, hardworking dudes out there, I think there's substantial smoke here in terms of like, hey, there's fire. Like this could be a real thing here for the Broncos.
Yeah, there's certain teams that you really pay attention to with Schrager when it comes to the NFL draft. He has great connections with the Arizona Cardinals, Cliff Kingsbury, the LA Rams. Obviously he worked with Sean Payton when they were together at Fox Sports. And so it's worth paying attention to when he says anything about the Broncos, especially when he's zigging while everyone else is zagging. Like you said, every other mock draft right now, including the mock draft from Sean Payton's own daughter, has the team taking Omarion Hampton at 20 overall. People are saying basically foregone conclusion, Broncos are going to get running back 2 in the consensus running back 2 in the draft. How often does Sean Payton ever go with the consensus, right? Oh, yeah, just second best running back on the board. Obviously, at the Broncos, that's where they're going to go at 20. I'm not saying they won't take Hampton. I think they very well could take Hampton, but I think it's fascinating that Schrager has them taking Egbuka here when it looks to me like Hampton's on the board. Hampton goes 24th overall to the Vikings in Schrager's mock. Also interesting that Shedeur Sanders still on the board there at 21. If Shedur's on the board at 20, Cody, I think the Broncos are going to get a lot of calls from other teams trying to move up and get him.
Yeah, I'm surprised because I think a lot of people are trying to tie in like, are the Saints going to take him? And obviously it's been reported that the Saints really like Jackson Dart, that they may try to trade back or trade up into round 2 to be able to get him. I mean, they could go multiple ways. And then obviously there's been a lot of Shedeur Sanders to Pittsburgh smoke as well. And it seems like obviously in Schrager's, that is not the case here. I'm very curious. I'm very, very curious how this is going to go here. But to me, obviously Sean's daughter works for FanDuel, right? And so, I think she puts out a mock draft. I think everyone's like, oh yeah, his own daughter puts it, as you said, lock it in. It's Omarion Hampton. And look, obviously, I think for her, she'd have some insider knowledge. She'd have some insider stuff there. I don't know if that would be the case. This could be, I think Sean's daughter, I think her posting her mock draft, I think that is actual smoke screen. I think maybe Schrager's, there's a little bit of fire here. I can smell the sage burning. We'll see if that's actually the case here as the Broncos are on the board. But man, let's go through here as well. Like if you had to anticipate how tonight's draft is going to go, not just for the Broncos, but from an NFL standpoint, what do you expect here tonight?
I think we have to expect craziness because everybody's been saying that it's going to be such a boring first round. Right now, what's really wild is that all 32 teams, they have a first round pick. I can't remember that ever happening as long as I've been following the drafts, Cody. I can't remember the last time that all 32 teams had a first round pick. I don't think it's going to stay that way. I think there is going to be some jockeying and competition for certain guys at certain positions, even though the rumors right now are that, hey, nobody wants to trade up. I think that's to get the price to come down potentially, right? I mean, and that's what we're hearing, of course, right? When it comes to what's behind the scenes right now, I think that's what's fascinating. And teams are going to get desperate. Look, the Cleveland Browns, their starting quarterback, if the season started today, is probably Joe Flacco, right? I mean, the New York Giants, they need a long-term solution at that position, or Brian Daboll and Joe Shane are going to get fired at the end of the year because they don't have a future vision. They need to get somebody in the building. The Saints, Derek Carr's injury, that is a major cause for concern that causes major desperation moves in the NFL draft. So while the quarterbacks this year are probably more along the lines of, the 2011 class or the 2022 class, with all due respect to those guys, I feel like this is going to be a bit of a frenzy when it comes to when the bullets start flying or when the picks start rolling in. I think things are going to start to get a little bit wild.
I think of the Giants because you brought them up there. Obviously, with Brian Daboll, Joe Shane, they got a lot riding on this year. They're on the hot seat. For me, it's like they attached their wagon to Jameis Winston, Russell Wilson. I think those guys are going to compete for the starting job there. Would it make sense for the Giants to draft a quarterback knowing that, hey, they could fire their coach and their GM, and they're going to bring in a new GM and a new coach who may not be married to the idea of whatever quarterback is available there? I wonder how certain picks are going to influence maybe the futures of a handful of organizations out there. The Broncos, I feel like they're in a great spot. What are the Jaguars going to do? Are we going to see teams take advantage of some of the new GM head coach structures that are there? I think more so you look at Jacksonville because you have a younger guy there. How might teams try to fleece them a little bit? I don't know if that's going to be the case with Darren Muji and Aaron Glenn and obviously with the New York Jets. But maybe the Broncos do business with them at some point during the draft. I'm very curious to see how it's all going to play out here. But Broncos country, we want to know your thoughts on Peter Schrager having Emeka Egbuka landing with the Denver Broncos, going along with my prediction of who I have the Broncos landing tonight at 20th overall. But here's what you can expect. Okay, there's going to be a frenzy that's going on here at the NFL draft. When the Broncos make the selection, you're going to get a bonus episode from Sayre Bedinger and myself. We're going to react to the pick, what it means from the instant status of, how does this transform the Broncos? Will it be on offense? Will it be on defense? You're going to get all that and a ton of bonus content all throughout the weekend here on Locked On Broncos. With that said, Broncos country, we appreciate you. We'll see you tonight after the pick.